Hello. I'm Rui, and I mostly speedrun fairly obscure N64 games. These games generally don't have a lot of speedrunning documentation, so in this series I want to cover the game's history as a speed game, including the world record progression and interesting speed tech like glitches, skips, and movement, along with my personal experience and thoughts on these games. I hope you enjoy. Okay, Gex 3 Deep Cover Gecko has a pretty wild history. The game doesn't have a lot of world record holders on the N64, but when it comes to glitches, skips, and progression, there is a lot of cool tech to cover. The game has some fancy movement tech, menu glitches, some wild out-of-bounds skips, duping, wall clips, and even wrong warps. As a speed game, I feel like this game has a bit of everything, and I'm very excited to present this video, so strap in, because we're in for a ride here. One disclaimer before we continue, this video is only about the N64 version of the game. The game was released on the PlayStation version and the N64 version, and historically the PlayStation version has been speedrun much more. I want to make it very clear though that unless stated otherwise, this video is only about the N64 version of the game. Now, before I talk about the speedrunning journey this game has been through or the world record history, I think we should talk a bit about just what kind of game this is and how everything is set up. The game is a third-person collectathon platformer where you play as the lizard Gex and you have to enter levels, or TVs, to collect stuff. The game has 4 worlds. The first one is Mission Control, and it has the entrances to the rest of the worlds, which are Lake Placid, Slappy Valley, and Funky Town. Now, I want to mention here that the map I'm showing on screen here cannot all be loaded in at the same time while playing the game, so I have puzzled together these parts based on where one part should theoretically connect to the other. Therefore, I have taken the liberty of moving things around a bit for convenience and visual purposes. Just know that in reality the overworld map is a bit different from what I am showing, but we'll kind of get to that later in the video. But okay, each one of these worlds has a few main levels, or TV stages. It also has bonus levels and secret levels. The main collectibles in the game are TV remotes. Each main level requires a certain amount of remotes for the player to access it, similar to how stars work in Super Mario 64. Each main level has 3 remotes for you to collect by finishing certain tasks, and 1 remote you get by collecting 100 of these fly coins, again similar to the coin system in Super Mario 64. In addition to those, there are a few remotes scattered throughout the hub worlds, and all in all this leads to 50 remotes in the game in total. To reach the final boss of the game, you need to collect 30 remotes. In addition to remotes and fly coins, you can also collect bonus coins, which grant access to bonus levels, where you can play mini-games for remotes and more. Now, let's talk about the movement and how that works. It's important to note here that this game was largely designed with the PlayStation in mind, which mostly uses a D-pad as opposed to an analog stick, so Gex's movement is very binary by nature. This means you cannot push the analog stick partially forward to make Gex walk slower. There's basically only moving or not moving, and nothing in between. This also means Gex can only walk in 8 directions, as opposed to having a full range of 360 degrees. Although holding one direction and moving the camera instead can achieve more fluent turns than changing directions with the controller or the D-pad. Now, Gex still actually has 2 different walking speeds. When you start holding forward, Gex will walk briefly before white smoke appears under his feet and he gains full speed. This walking speed is very important because it directly correlates to Gex's jump height. When Gex jumps, he first does one low jump, and then if you buffer the jump button while in the air, Gex will do a higher jump, or a bounce of sorts. And he will keep doing these bounces as long as you keep buffering the jump before landing. But since movement speed relates to jump height and there are 2 running speeds, that means there are 2 sets of high and low jumps, or 4 types of jumps. There is low speed low jump and low speed high jump, and then there is high speed low jump and high speed high jump. These play a major role in speedrunning the game, since a lot of the time you need the highest available jump to reach certain ledges, so you must make sure to have high speed when you start the jumping sequence. Alternatively, using a high jump when you only need a low jump could slow you down. I should also mention here that lag can influence jump height quite a lot in this game, so the more lag, the higher and longer you jump. So none of these previously mentioned jump heights are set in stone as to how high or long they will actually go. Gex then also has a long jump, which is performed by holding R and jumping, and note that these long jumps can only be achieved after getting high speed, and if you are in low speed, Gex just crouches on the ground when pressing R. These long jumps are the fastest form of movement in the game, so it's always preferred to do long jumps when there is space to do so. However, this can be dangerous because after starting a long jump, Gex's direction cannot be changed, so you have to commit to one angle when you jump. This can often lead to Gex accidentally having a slightly wrong angle and Gex jumping off a cliff with no way of stopping it after the jump has been initiated. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the movement in the game. So let's go back to the start and look at the history. Unfortunately, a lot of the earliest history has been lost. The first runner to run the game was a runner called Frogbert, but this player is better known today by the name he would take up later, Apollo Legend, which is what I will be calling him for the rest of the video. Sadly, Apollo Legend passed away in 2020, and as far as I know, none of the videos for his Gex 3 runs have been preserved, so there is a lot of lost media and history there. Fortunately, I was able to find a few short videos of Apollo doing some glitch hunting for Gex, and in one of them he has his splits on screen. The splits say 52:19 as the final time, so it's likely this was the world record at some point in early 2014. Let's set up a world record progression chart here, and we will place this run at the start of 2014. However, as we don't have any video, we don't really know what tricks he was using or how he got this time, so this does not give us a lot of insight into the history of the game. To get better insight, we have to go back a bit and look at another player. The first person to run the game with existing video evidence is the runner Sander Goth, which, if you watched my Turok video, you will know that Sander is an incredibly skilled speedrunner. And I guess I'll just spoil this a bit, but Sander is going to be our main protagonist throughout this video. Now, to set the stage for the speedrunning journey, let's look at the route used to get to the final boss in the first full game run with video evidence. This first run was set on the 11th of October 2013 and was by Sander. Now, this first run serves as a great demonstration for how the game works, since the first run does not really have any glitches or skips and provides a good base to introduce the skips later on. Now, I am going to take a bit of time to go through the route here at first, but bear with me here. There will be a lot of changes to the route as we move on, and I think it's important to understand the basic route first so we can truly appreciate the changes when they come up. Okay, so Sander starts in mission control, and the first thing he does is to enter this training area to get one remote. He is then teleported back to the start, and just so you know, I will represent teleports in the route with these dotted lines. He then collects one free remote in mission control before heading into the first stage, Totally Scrooged, which requires one remote to enter. In there he collects all 3 main remotes, and when you collect 5 remotes you gain the key to access the next world, Lake Flaccid. But before heading there he goes into Mission Control's other TV stage, Clueless in Seattle, where he first collects 1 remote, but when collecting certain remotes, the game plays a cutscene in Mission Control, or here at the start of the game. So the game automatically boots Gex back to the start, so he has to walk back to the level and re-enter Clueless in Seattle to collect a second remote, bringing the total to 7. He then enters the next world, Lake Flaccid, and enters the first TV stage there, Holy Moses, requiring 5 remotes to enter. In Holy Moses, he first collects 1 remote, but again, after collecting the first remote in the level, the game plays a cutscene and boots him back to the start, just like what had happened in Clueless in Seattle. So Xander therefore has to make his way back to Holy Moses, where he collects 2 more remotes, bringing his total to 10. He then enters the next 2 levels, War is Heck and Cut Cheese Island, where he collects 5 more remotes. He then enters Lake Flacid's last main TV stage, the Organ Trail, where he first collects 1 remote, but like before, when he collects this one, he gets booted back to mission control, so he has to make his way back to the Organ Trail, where he collects the other 2 remotes, bringing the total to 18. After finishing the Organ Trail, he moves on to the first boss level in the game, On the Ropes, and after defeating the boss, he gets access to the 3rd world, Slappy Valley. In Slappy Valley, he first enters the level at to Gecko, where he collects 3 remotes, and then he heads to Beanstalker, where he first collects 1 remote. But yet again, when collecting this remote, he gets booted back to mission control, so he has to make his way all the way back to Beanstalker to collect 1 more remote, bringing his total to 23. He then enters the level When Sushi Goes Bad, where he collects 2 more remotes. After this, he goes to the second boss fight, Lions, Tigers and Gex, and after defeating the boss, he gains access to the last world, Funky Town. In there, he first enters the level My 3 Goons, where he collects 3 remotes, and lastly enters the final level, Super Zeros, where he collects the last 2 remotes to get to 30 remotes in total. And by having 30 remotes, he can enter the final boss located here and finish the game. Okay, that's the basic route. Well, now let's see if we can shorten this a bit. Okay, now that we have gotten the movement and basic routing out of the way, we can really start diving into the intricacies of speedrunning this game. Like I mentioned before, Xander Goth is our main character in this video, and this game's history is largely just Xander's history with the game, at least for the N64 version. Although we will see a few more players pop up every now and then. Xander started out playing on an emulator in 2013. His first uploaded run was on the 11th of October 2013 and used the previously mentioned route. There were no real skips per se in the run, except for a few minor jumps to skip small platforming sections. Now, these runs were performed on an emulator, which is fairly notable because of lag. The benefit of using an emulator is that the game runs a lot faster. This game can lag a lot, and sometimes you're practically playing in slow motion on real hardware. But as mentioned before, lag also affects jump height, and without lag, some of the jumps in the game become extremely difficult or outright impossible. So while you gain time on emulator, it's considerably more difficult to run on emulator. Based on his splits, Xander would then presumably get a time of 55 minutes and 25 seconds, but this run was not uploaded while his next run was. A time of 53 minutes and 30 seconds, set on the 14th of February 2014. At this point, Xander had added some tricks into the run, and the first trick was in the very first level, Totally Scrooged. The first remote is collected like this. You first run through this section and through the opening here into the second section, and then through another opening to this third section, where you have to cross this water to get to one last opening to go through and get to the last section. In this last section you kill a few enemies, which makes the remote spawn, and then collect it here. So looking at the map, the route looks something like this. However, what I'm showing you on screen is only how it feels to the player. You see, every time you go from one section to the next, you go through a loading zone and you are teleported from one section to the next. So in fact, the level layout is actually completely different. The real level layout looks something like this, where each part of the level is scattered about in seemingly random locations in space, and every time you go through an opening, the game teleports you from one part of the map to the next. The player Scrimpbad discovered that you could use this bench right at the start of the level to jump on top of this wall here, where Gex could then fall off to get out of bounds, where he would fall for a while before landing right here in the last section of the level, where you kill the enemies. The route then looked like this, where you start the level here, go to the wall and jump straight down into the last section, skipping having to go through all of these different parts of the level, and allowing you to go straight from the first section to the last one. Then, after playing the second level, Clueless in Seattle, Xander looked at this painting, which turns him into a vampire and grants him the ability to glide in the air using his cape. In the game, Gex can wear different costumes, and some of these costumes grant him different abilities. One of these is the ability to press R while in the air, which allows Gex to glide slowly towards the ground, and from now on I will just refer to this as the gliding ability. After getting the gliding ability, he then went to this spot and clipped through the wall here to get out of bounds, which I believe had been discovered by Apollo Legend. Now, remember this training area we saw earlier? Well, just like in Totally Scrooged, the layout of the level doesn't actually look like this. These parts of the training area are actually scattered about like this under the main hub. So by going out of bounds here, Xander was able to fall through the void here and use the cape to carefully land in this part of the training area. Or if we look at it on the map here, he clipped through here and fell into this part of the training area. He then finished the training area normally and collected the remote at the end of it. But with this route he was able to skip a part of the training area. He then continued just like before until the level Cut Cheese Island, where he implemented the next skip. At the start of the level, you're normally supposed to press a button here. Go to this cannon and shoot the eyes of this skull, which grants you access to the next part of the level. The player Scrimpe, however, discovered that you can just jump on this light post here and then on the top of the skull here, and then onto this platform here, skipping the cannon shooting completely. Xander modified this a bit by jumping from the post onto this beam and then to the top through the ground here to reach the platform. And since this skip was right at the start of the level, it could be used for both remotes collected in the level, saving time both times. Now Xander would also implement a death abuse in the Organ Trail, this kind of cool looking lava boost in Ed to Gecko, and another death abuse in Beanstalker. He also changed the route a bit by collecting 3 remotes in Beanstalker and only 2 in Holy Moses. After the level When Sushi Goes Bad, he then implemented a fairly big skip. After Sushi Goes Bad, you're normally supposed to play the second boss in the game, located here. But this time, instead of playing the boss, Xander just went straight to mission control here and utilized the same clip as he had used to get into the training room early. Now this door actually leads to the last world in the game, so by clipping through here, Xander could access the last world without having to play the boss to get the key. However, after clipping through the door, Xander was placed in the air, so Xander started falling down, seemingly having missed the loading zone for the next world. However, if you fall for long enough while out of bounds in some parts of the game, the level actually loops around, meaning you go from the bottom straight to the top of the level again. So by continuing to fall for long enough, he would eventually reach the same spot as he was when he went out of bounds. And by maneuvering Gex to the right spot using the gliding ability, he could land on the other side of the door and enter the loading zone for the next world. This level looping method was found by Crash41596, who would also find out later that with a precise enough angle and maneuvering, you could also get to the loading zone without having to loop the level around to get to the other side of the door. But yeah, by getting to the other side of the door, the boss in the second world, Lions, Tigers and Gex, did not have to be played. So one of the game's 3 bosses could now be completely skipped. Xander then completed the run as usual from there. Now, based on Xander's splits, he would then get a run clocking in at 51 minutes and 4 seconds, but there is no video evidence for this run. However, his next PB would be a big one, and it clocked in at 48 minutes and 55 seconds on the 8th of May 2014. This run is over 4 minutes faster than the previous run we talked about, and that's because he now had a few more skips to work with. Let's take a look. The first notable skip he implemented was a faster way to skip the entire training area, instead of just part of it. Now, before, Xander had gone out of bounds here and then dropped down here to this section of the training area, where he then had to finish the rest normally. Well, this time again he got the gliding ability, went out of bounds at the same spot, but instead of dropping down and then playing a part of the training area, Xander had discovered he could just glide under the level here and all the way to the end of the training area, skipping all of it. The route then looked like this, where he went out of bounds here and glided all the way here to the end of the training area. Then in the level War is Hack, he added in a new death abuse, which Xander had discovered himself. You're normally supposed to destroy these 5 tents in these locations. When you destroy the 5th tent, a long cutscene plays showing a TV being hauled in. Sander skipped the cutscene by taking damage while destroying the tents and by destroying the final tent right before this enemy throws a grenade at him, so he manages to die just as the cutscene starts playing. This overrides the cutscene and spawns Gex back at the start of the level, which incidentally is also where the remote spawned in, so he was able to go straight to the remote without having to watch the cutscene. Then in the level My 3 Goons, he implemented one more skip. Normally you start in this part of the level, and to get out of this area you have to hit the TV here to get a projectile upgrade, meaning you can shoot things. You can then shoot this lock on this gate, and that lets you through to the next part of the level. The player Scrimpe had discovered you could instead jump towards this enemy right as he was about to throw this box, and by timing it just right, he could bounce on the box and just barely make it to the top of the roof here, skipping having to open the gate. Sander then modified the setup a bit to do it even sooner and somewhat more consistently. Now, this jump can be used for all 3 remotes in the level, and in some cases this doesn't just skip opening the gate, but by being on top of the roof it in fact gives you a better route through the level. So getting this all 3 times can save a hefty amount of time. In this run, Sander only got it once out of the 3 times, but it is an extremely precise trick, so getting it all 3 times is incredibly difficult. Now, this run would be Sander's last run on emulator. The speedrun.com leaderboards don't allow emulator runs for the N64 version, so none of Sander's previously mentioned runs can be considered official world records. But this was about to change, as the next run Sander performed was on console, and would mark the first record where we can definitively say that Sander had the world record. And well, Sander was just getting started. So, at this point in our story, Sander switched to playing on console. As mentioned before, console lags a lot, making the entire run slower. But it is also considerably easier because you can jump much higher and longer with more lag, so many tight jumps in the game become considerably easier on console. And then, of course, well, playing in slow motion can sometimes just be a bit easier than playing fast. Now, just to recap a bit, we know Apollo Legend got a 5219 probably at some point in early 2014, but we have no video of that. Well, when Sander started playing on console, he quickly managed to get a 5111 on the 2nd of July 2014, and this is the first run we can call an actual world record with proper video evidence. Then, 3 days later, on the 5th of July, Sander got a 4949, then on the 7th he got a 4944, and then finally on the 8th of July 2014 he would beat his old emulator time with a run clocking in at 48 minutes and 7 seconds. Now, in this run, Sander had added in a few more tricks, and since the route is about to change a bit, let's track it on the overworld map here as we go. Instead of starting with the training area, Sander went straight into the first level. He then played like he had done before until after collecting the first remote in Clueless in Seattle, where after being booted out of the level to start the game, Sander didn't re-enter the level but instead went right to the next level, Holy Moses. Instead, he would re-enter Clueless in Seattle later in the run. He then played the game normally until he reached the level The Organ Trail, and this is where I feel the speedrun really starts to elevate to a higher level of complexity and routing nuance, because it's at this point we start introducing a key mechanic in Gex speedrunning, which is a technique called a TV cancel. Now, when you collect a remote, the game sends you out of the level, so if you want to collect another remote in the level, you have to re-enter the level. Well, let's take a look at the traditional route through the Organ Trail. For the first remote, you have to collect these 5 cards and then go in here to collect the remote. You then exit the level and re-enter, and again, from the start, you go here to the top of the level to collect the second remote. You then exit the level again and re-enter it to go here across these moving platforms to reach the third remote over here. Now, these can of course be done in any order, but you can see they are essentially 3 completely separate or contained missions having no effect on one another. Well, Sander did things a bit differently. Sander did the first remote as usual, but made sure to get a checkpoint here while collecting the 5 cards. After collecting all the cards, the remote spawned in this room here. Now, in this room, instead of collecting the remote right away, Sander got himself in position right next to this button. I should note that when collecting the remote, touching the 3D model of the remote here is not relevant at all. Instead, it's by stepping on the button here that actually collects the remote for you. Now, in this room there's an enemy which removes his head and throws it at Gex, and after getting in position next to the button, Sander waited for the enemy to throw his hat towards him, and as soon as he saw the hat appear on screen, he started pause buffering, and once the hat was in the right position, Gex stepped onto the button, and right after he stepped on the button, the hat landed on Gex. Previously in the level, Sander had taken intentional damage, so when the hat landed on Gex, he died. Now, normally since Gex stepped on the button, the game would boot Gex out of the level, so he would need to re-enter it again. But the death overrides that, and instead it spawns Gex at the checkpoint he had collected earlier, inside the level. And conveniently, since he had stepped on the button just before he died, he had also collected the remote. From the checkpoint, the route to the 3rd remote here past the platforms was much shorter than from the start of the level, so Gex was able to collect the next remote much faster. With this, Sander had collected 2 remotes in one trip through the level. Now, we are going to see a few different versions of TV cancels throughout the video, but they are mostly always achieving the same thing, skipping being booted out of the level so more remotes can be collected through a single trip into the level. As for the discovery of these types of TV cancels, I was not able to find out precisely who found it, but the first video evidence is by the runner Andy Panther, who mentions in his video description that this is based on an idea from the runner Exe, who had discovered you could jump on a button and die at the same time. As for this particular TV cancel in the Organ Trail, it is likely it was found by Apollo Legend. Now, within the level this is all pretty nice, but there's actually another even bigger benefit to this. Remember how sometimes the game boots Gex all the way back to mission control or the start of the game when collecting certain remotes? Well, one of these remotes is the first one you collect in the Organ Trail. So Sander, by dying as he collects the first remote, also skips that trip back to mission control completely, so he never has to make this detour where he has to re-enter the same level from the start of the game, saving a bunch of time. After the Organ Trail, Sander would normally go beat the first boss in the game, but instead of doing that, he saves the game and then loads that same save file, and this spawns him back at mission control. Since he doesn't have the key to continue to Slappy Valley, Sander instead clips through the door here to land on the other side of the door, skipping the need for the key and therefore the boss fight as well. The player Andy Panther was the first person to find a way past this door, but Sander would improve it to the version used in runs today. He then entered Et2 Gecko, where he implemented another TV cancel. The first remote is normally done by going this way through the level, breaking 5 vases in these locations, and then collecting a remote here. The second remote normally just involves going this route through the level to collect the remote here. Sander, however, when collecting the first remote, made sure to get a checkpoint here on his way to breaking the vases. After breaking all the vases, he went to the remote here to perform the TV cancel, but this time around there were no enemies to throw stuff at him, so Sander had to use a different method to die while pressing the switch. By pressing B, Gex does a spin attack, where he spins in a circle and hits enemies with his tail. Normally, when you press a TV button, the game immediately starts a cutscene where Gex is sucked into the TV to end the level. But the player Andy Panther discovered that if you do a spin attack just before landing on a remote button, the game won't start the level-ending cutscene until after the spin attack finishes. This gives you a little bit of leeway to move after hitting the button. I believe it was the player Apollo Legend who discovered that for this particular remote you could jump towards the button, press B just before landing so he started the spin attack. He then, during the spin attack, immediately moved off the button and completely off the platform here into the lava surrounding the platform. In order for the level-ending cutscene to start, Gex needs to be standing on the ground, but when landing in the lava, Gex never really lands and instead just bounces on the lava, taking damage, so the level-ending cutscene can't start. You can then just take repeated damage in the lava until you die. And voila, Gex then died, having pressed the button and collected the remote, and spawned at the checkpoint instead of being thrown out of the level. From the checkpoint he could then go directly towards the second remote. So again, if we look at this on the map here, you start by getting the checkpoint here, break all 5 bases, perform the TV cancel on the remote here, spawn back at the checkpoint to go a much quicker route towards the second remote, instead of having to play all the way from the start of the level. Then, in the very next level, Beanstalker, he implemented yet another TV cancel. For the first remote, you start the level down here and climb all the way to the top of the level here, where you can collect the remote. The second remote is again collected by climbing the beanstalk, but on the way you blow out 3 candles located in these 3 locations. After blowing out the candles, you jump back down and collect the remote at the bottom here. Well, instead, you could also start by collecting the 3 candles, but while you are at the top here, you collect a checkpoint located here. You then jump down to the remote at the bottom, but instead of collecting the remote right away, you position yourself next to the button and wait for this bee to attack you. When the bee attacks, you step on the button so the bee kills you right as you stepped on the button. This allows you to collect the remote, but since you also died, the game spawns you at the checkpoint at the top of the level, and from there you can head straight for the remote at the top and collect that in the same trip through the level. So the route then looks like this: climb up the beanstalk once and hit the 3 candles along with getting the checkpoint up here, jump down and do the TV cancel at the bottom, then spawn back at the checkpoint at the top to go directly to the next remote, so this way you only have to climb the beanstalk once instead of twice. And I'm fairly sure it was Apollo Legend who discovered this particular trick. Now again, this didn't just save this climbing within the level, because Beanstalker, just like the Organ Trail, is also one of these levels that boots you back to the start of the game after collecting the first remote. But by dying instead of being made to exit the level, you skip being booted back to the start, skipping this long detour here completely. Conveniently, this also made the routing a bit easier, since if this TV cancel didn't exist, you would have to clip through the door here twice. Once for the first time you go through, and the second time after being booted back to the start to re-enter the level. And this clip is pretty finicky and difficult, so only having to do this once in the run is a great relief. He then played When Sushi Goes Bad, where he used a slightly different route, utilizing an out-of-bounds flight and this clip through the glass to streamline the route a bit. I should also mention that in this level, When Sushi Goes Bad, Sander only collected 1 remote instead of the 2 he had done in the previous route through the game. After that, he saved the game and reloaded to get back to the start of the game. He then entered the level Clueless in Seattle a second time to get a second remote there. After that, he goes out of bounds to skip the training area and collects the remote there, which then warps him back to the start of the game, and then he goes to the same spot to perform the same door clip again to get to the other side of the door to get into the final world. And I should mention here, we have now skipped both of the bosses that open up new worlds. And out of the game's 3 bosses, only the final one has to be played. Then in the level Super Zeros, he implemented a skip that's really only possible on console. Normally, to get here, you need to go around this building, climb up this wall, get into this elevator, right up here, and then you are across. Sander, however, just went on top of the TV here at the start, positioned the camera towards the start of the level for maximum lag, and then did a long jump across to the roof here, where there's a fan that blows you upwards to get to the next roof. This jump is only possible with enough lag, so it is, as far as I can tell, not possible on emulator. He then proceeded to collect 3 remotes in Super Zeros to make up for the remote he had skipped in when Sushi goes bad. He then beat the final boss, and that was it for that run. Now, 5 days after this run, on the 13th of July 2014, he would set a new world record with a time of 47 minutes and 59 seconds. Then another 2 days later, he broke yet another minute barrier with a time of 46 minutes and 56 seconds. In this run, Sander also implemented a different method to get out of bounds in mission control by jumping on top of this camera, which, as far as I can tell, was discovered by the player Lil Gringo. Before, you had to clip through the wall here, which is difficult and inconsistent, but by jumping on the camera and gliding up against the wall to get height to get over the wall, the trick got a lot more consistent. He also changed the route a bit in Beanstalker and clipped through this wall here to get into When Sushi Goes Bad a bit earlier. Now, in this run, Sander used a faster method to beat the final boss of the game. This faster method had been evolving over the last few PBs, but at this point it had reached a fairly optimized form, so I want to take a bit of time to talk about this strat. This method to kill the boss is slightly convoluted, so let's first get a decent understanding of how the normal fight works. The boss is located here in the middle of this circle platform, and then there are 3 other platforms or islands around the main circle, connected with bridges to the main circle. To damage the boss, you need to shoot him with projectiles while he is vulnerable, and to kill him you need to shoot him 5 times. These projectiles can be collected by hitting these TVs. When you hit a TV, a fly comes out, and when you're close enough to the fly, it will attach to Gex or start flying around him, following him wherever he goes. You can then press set to eat the fly, and once you eat it, you get the ability to shoot projectiles for 15 seconds. Keep in mind that after eating a fly, it's possible to collect a second fly and attach it to Gex to store it to use for later, so you can eat it after the previous one has expired. But okay, you start the fight here and you can collect a fly right away to shoot the boss once for 1 hit or damage. You then run across to the main circle platform and the bridge behind you will collapse. You then have to stay on the circle platform through a series of attacks from the final boss, and during these the boss is invulnerable to damage, but once the attack cycle is finished, the bridge re-emerges and the boss becomes vulnerable again. So you can go back to the outer platform to collect a fly and shoot him for 1 hit of damage. Now, the boss takes 5 hits before dying, so you need to repeat this procedure 3 more times to finish him off, which takes just over 2 minutes to do. Now, for the fast strat, which I believe was developed by the players Sandergoth, Reese65536 and Tygame. Sander started the boss normally by hitting him once for the first damage and running across the platform. But as soon as he came to the main platform, he went into first-person mode or aiming mode and shot the boss as many times as he could before the first attack from the boss came. Now, the boss was not damaged by these shots, but every time he shot the boss suffered a tiny bit of recoil and moved backwards. So, after all the shots, the boss was not located in the middle of the arena anymore. Now, remember how after reaching the middle platform you normally have to wait through a series of attacks before the bridge reappears and the boss becomes vulnerable again? Well, it turns out that the trigger for making the boss vulnerable again is when you walk across the bridge and leave a certain radius away from the boss. But since Sander had shot the boss a bunch of times and moved it from the middle of the arena, the radius for the boss was not in sync with the main platform any longer. And by simply standing here at the edge of the platform, Sander had tricked the game into thinking he was already on the bridge, and this ended the attack phase early to make the boss vulnerable again. Now, if you're quick enough, you can do this within the projectile timer running out, so you can shoot him 1 more time before the timer runs out for the second damage. You then have to wait a bit, because if you leave the boss's radius too early, he has not started a new phase yet and will not become vulnerable again. After waiting for the next series of attacks to start, you can jump back to the outer platform. This jump can be kind of tight, especially on emulator, but on console it's considerably easier because of lag. When you jump back, you leave the boss's radius again, so he becomes vulnerable again. You then get a fly, eat it right away, and shoot the boss for the 3rd damage. But before returning to the main platform, you pick up a second fly and attach it to Gex to store. You then jump back to the main platform, where you again go to the edge here to trick the game into thinking the phase is finished, and again shoot him right before the timer runs out for the 4th damage. You then wait for the next set of attacks to start, eat the fly you were storing to get projectiles again, move to the edge of the arena to make the boss vulnerable, and shoot him one last time to end the fight. This version of the fight takes just over a minute, so it saves around a minute of time over doing the boss normally. Now, as a side note, I just want to mention that across all the bosses I have played in the games that I have speedrun, this boss fight might just be my favorite one. It took me a while to understand exactly how all of this works, but once you get the hang of it, it is so satisfying to pull off. It's really easy to lose track of where in the process you are during the fight, and you really need to focus throughout the whole fight, and everything has to go according to plan for it to work. Now, it's not very difficult when you get the hang of it, but when everything just clicks together like that, it's just so satisfying, and that's one of the best parts in speedrunning in my opinion. Tricks that require many pieces to come together smoothly for everything to work out. Now, there is still one more run to talk about, because, well, the last world record we mentioned, the 4656, was actually the last world record we have video evidence for. But the world record on the top of the leaderboard on speedrun.com clocks in at 45 minutes and 48 seconds. This run has no video and no date, only this message from the moderators. No video or date, but it was done. Just to fill the leaderboards, verified by Sir Sanju. Now, knowing just how skilled Sander is, I have no doubts about the validity of this run. Sander's sum of best in his last run with video evidence is 44 minutes and 10 seconds, and I think it's entirely within his skill level to get a run around 100 seconds slower than his sum of best. Now, of course, with no video evidence, anyone can draw their own conclusions, but in my mind, the world record is a 45:48. And yes, this run is indeed still the world record at the release of this video. As you might see by the length of this video, there's still plenty to talk about. I know I mentioned that Sander's last run is still the world record, but believe me when I say this story is by no means done, and in fact, I'd say that the truly juicy parts are yet to come. At this point in our story, a huge skip would be discovered that completely revolutionized how to play this game fast. This glitch was so big in fact that it split the leaderboard into two and a new any % route was formed. But before we talk about that, I want to wrap things up with this category, since in the last few years a lot of new tech has emerged. We can assume the 45-minute run by Sander was set shortly after the 46-minute run, so maybe July or August of 2014. We also know that on the 21st of July 2014, the runner Apollo Legend submitted a run clocking in at 47 minutes and 23 seconds. To the best of my knowledge, none of his runs have been archived, and the reason I bring this up is because this would be the last activity the category would see for more than 9 years. That is, until I and a few others decided to speedrun the game. Those who have watched my videos will know that twice a year I host an event called the Holiday Special, where me and a few N64 speedrunning friends will choose an N64 game to run, and over a few weeks we will see how low we can bring our times. The first game we did was Bug Bumble, we then did Turok 1, then Spider-Man, and this time for Christmas 2023 we voted on Gex 3, so we had all of December to explore this game. I also want to mention that if you watching this are a speedrunner and feel interested in taking part in this event, feel free to contact me through Discord or speedrun.com. Now, although I have already spoiled the fact that we would not achieve any world records, we still had our work cut out for us. The first thing to note is that when we started exploring the leaderboards, what awaited us was a pretty barren sight. There were 2 runs on the leaderboard, the 45 by Sander and the 47 by Apollo Legend. And as mentioned before, neither of these runs had a video, so at first we didn't have anything to go by for routing and such. We quickly found Sander's 46-minute run, which had a video, so at least we had a base to work with. This run, however, was over 9 years old at that point, and the PlayStation version of the game had seen a lot more activity during the years. So after learning the run, we had to go on an archaeological excavation of sorts, where we had to sort through the last 9 years of the game's history to test all the stuff that had been discovered on the PlayStation version and see what could be applied to the N64 version. It was our job to modernize the run, so to speak. So let's go through all the stuff we implemented into our PVs and track it on the map here. And yeah, just a quick note, when I say we, it was me, Archie, and Bluescreen18 who ran the game for this event. The first major thing we implemented is something Sander had actually discovered, but after he got his 45-minute run, so he never implemented it. There are these bonus levels scattered around the game where you play a short minigame within the levels, and when you finish the level you gain a password or cheat code which you can use if you beat all 4 bonus levels in the game. Sander discovered that if you finish the bonus level, press start to open the menu right after you finish and exit the level, the game for some reason awards you an extra remote. Now, we don't really know why this happens. We suspect it has something to do with the fact that the game also gives you an extra life, and that it has something to do with the animation of that extra life appearing. It's like this animation has a flag associated with it that makes you gain 1 remote, but to cancel this they make you lose that remote as you leave the level. However, by quitting out early you leave after getting the remote, but before the game can take it away from you again. Or that's the theory, at least. It's also interesting that this remote that we collect doesn't have any place in the game, so if you open up the menu to look at the stats and what you have collected, you can exceed the maximum amount of remotes per area, or get 3 out of 2 remotes. It's almost like a ghost remote of sorts, which exists but also kind of doesn't exist in the game. I should also mention that this can only be done once per bonus level, or 4 times in total. However, in order to gain access to these bonus levels, you need to collect bonus coins, which are scattered all over the game. So, for example, the bonus level in the first world, Mission Control, requires 2 bonus coins to enter, and then the one in the second world, Lake Flaccid, requires 8 bonus coins. Because collecting these can take time, we only utilized this glitch once in the run, specifically in the first world. Collecting 2 bonus coins barely takes any time, so after collecting 2 bonus coins and finishing the first level, we entered the bonus level and got the ghost remote from there. With the ghost remote collected, we could skip 1 remote later in the run, and it just so happened that there was 1 level where we only collected 1 remote, which was the level when sushi goes bad, so we skipped that one. This meant that for the first time we were skipping a full level from the run. We don't know precisely how much time it saves, but probably close to a minute. I also want to note that it might save time to get the second ghost remote by collecting 8 bonus coins and skipping another remote, but it probably saves considerably less time. We don't really know yet because it requires a lot of timing and route testing to truly see which remotes are the slowest, especially since TV cancelling is now a thing where remotes are not independent from each other but can be collected together, which just makes for a whole new layer of complication for routing possibilities. So, for any future runners, there's still work to be done. We then played the run as Sander had done up until the level Holy Moses. Remember how in Holy Moses, after collecting the first remote, the game boots you out of the level to the start of the game? Well, it was time to skip that, but to do that we need to understand how pause screens work. Gex 3 essentially has 2 types of pause screens. If Gex is not moving and you just stand still and then press start, the game allows you to enter the whole menu, where you can press options, exit level, and all that stuff. If, however, Gex is moving when you press start, the pause screen just says paused, so you can't really do anything in the menu. Normally, when landing on a TV button to collect a remote, a cutscene plays where Gex is sucked into the TV, and during this animation, Gex is considered to be in the moving state, so if you press start, the menu just says paused. Earlier, the player Andy Panther had discovered that pressing B to do a spin attack just before landing on a TV button can delay the TV entry, and that at the end of each spin attack you had one frame where you could input another spin attack to extend the delay. The player Taikame expanded on this and found out that instead of pressing B again after the spin attack, you could instead use that single frame of input to press start and access the menu to exit the level. So to recap, if you do a spin attack just before landing on a TV button and then press start on the frame the spin attack ends, you can enter the full menu and from there choose the exit level option. So we have now collected the remote and the game wants to boot us to the start of the game to play a cutscene, but since we managed to press exit level in the menu, the game follows that command and just lets us exit the level normally, where we appear in front of the level entrance, not the start of the game. Now, this might sound like an extremely difficult frame-perfect trick, but after starting the spin attack you can actually just pause buffer one frame at a time until you land on the right frame. This is not easy per se and can easily be messed up, but it's also very doable, especially with some pause buffering practice. So now we could skip this detour to the start again, and with the other TV cancels mentioned before, we could now skip all the detours where the game boots you back to the start of the game. Then, in the level War is Hack, we implemented a pretty cool skip, with a TV cancel and some out-of-bounds shenanigans. Okay, let's review. Remember, there was one remote where you hit these 5 tents and then you death warp back to the start of the level. Okay. The second remote in the level is played like this. You go through the gate here and then you have to make your way across the war zone here and get into these gun turrets to shoot a bunch of guards. Once you've gotten rid of all the guards, the door to this barracks house opens and in there you collect the secret plans. When you then exit the barracks, a TV and a remote appear, which you can collect outside. Now again, the layout of the level that I'm showing is only how it feels like the level is set up, but the actual level layout is more like this. What we did was we started like normal by destroying the 5 tents, but made sure to enter this barracks and exit again. The reason we did that is by entering this lower part of the level, we lowered an invisible death plane from around here to below the room here. After destroying the 5 tents, we didn't do the death warp, but instead watched the cutscene and then went to this small TV here. When you hit the TV, it falls over up against the wall, and by running up against the TV at the right angle, you can clip through the wall here. Because earlier we had lowered the death plane, you can then fall through the out of bounds and land directly inside the barracks with the secret plans, skipping the whole war zone. But we're not done yet. We then left the barracks, spawned in the TV, and then by luring this grenade enemy to the right spot and then jumping onto the TV button right as the enemy explodes, we could perform a TV cancel. So we were not booted out of the level, but instead just respawned right to the start of the level where the tent remote was waiting for us to be picked up. So the route then looked like this: enter this barracks to lower the death plane, destroy the 5 tents, clip through the wall here and fall through the out of bounds into this room, collect the plans and perform the TV cancel here, which spawns you back to the start where you collect the tent remote. I should mention that the player Reese65536 discovered the out of bounds route and Taikame discovered the TV cancelling method. We then played everything as Sander had done, except that, like mentioned before, we skipped the level when Sushi goes bad completely, because we had collected the ghost remote from the bonus level here. Then, in the level My 3 Goons, we added a setup to do the crate jump to the top of the house, which I thought I had been the first to find, but while researching for this video I discovered that the player Crash41596 had actually discovered a similar setup much earlier. Sander had just sort of YOLO'd a jump, and if he didn't get it first try, he had to abandon the jump and open the gate the normal way. The setup we used involved running up against this house at the right spot and then jumping at a certain part of the animation where the enemy picks up the crate. If the timing is just right, you can land on the crate at the peak of its height and get to the top of the building. This was admittedly somewhat slower than Sander's version, but much easier and safer, so we used this strat for our runs. Then, in the last level in the game, we implemented what I think is one of the most satisfying speedrun routes I have played in my speedrunning journey. The double TV cancel route in Super Zeros. So let's break this level down a bit. The first remote is collected by getting rid of 3 cats in these 3 locations and then collecting the remote here. The second remote is collected by getting rid of 5 prison enemies located in these 5 locations and then collecting the remote over here. The third remote is then a mini-boss located here where you kick bombs back towards the boss to kill him and then collect the remote over here. With the double TV cancel route, we were able to do all of these remotes in one trip through the level. We started by going here to get rid of the 3 cats, but instead of collecting the remote here, we continued along the level and got a checkpoint over here. Now, this door here is normally closed and doesn't open until you defeat 3 specific enemies. But the door isn't actually closed the whole time, but rather, it closes as the player spawns into the world. The player Reese65536 discovered that by jumping off the edge here to die and then reappearing at the checkpoint here, if you manipulate the camera to see the door right as you enter the area, the door doesn't close. Then, by having access to this door, we can change suits and get a gliding upgrade. Having the gliding ability, we can glide around the level to get rid of the 5 prisoner enemies in a much quicker fashion than normally, taking a route like this through the level. While doing that, we also make sure to get a checkpoint located here. Now we kill the last prisoner enemy here, and after getting rid of him, we are right next to the remote that spawned after getting rid of the cats. So we go to that remote, and now we need to talk about a new method to perform a TV cancel. So if you are running at top speed and stop running, Gex will not stop immediately but instead do a skid animation where he briefly slides along the ground. The player Tie Game, with inspiration from Reese65536, discovered that if you run towards a TV button but stop running before you hit it and instead skid or slide on top of it, the game won't start the level ending animation until the skid has ended. This means you still have control of the character after hitting the button, and this allows you to jump and then start gliding, and this will allow you to glide far enough to get off the platform completely, and once you are off, you can stop flying and die by falling off the level. So you have successfully hit the TV button but died to skip being booted out of the level. Once that's done, you will respawn at the checkpoint here, so you can head right for the second remote for killing all the prisoner enemies located here, which is conveniently right next to the checkpoint. You then perform the same type of TV cancel on this TV, skid onto the button, jump off and glide into the nothingness to die. So you again spawn back at this same checkpoint, and from there you can take a much quicker route towards the mini-boss, which you can finish normally to collect the last remote in the level. And bam! You have just collected all 3 remotes in one go through the level. Now, I'm a big fan of long tricks like this, where many pieces have to come together for the final result to work. And this route just feels super satisfying and efficient to perform. So this is one of my favorite parts of speedrunning the game. As for who discovered this route through the level, I was unable to find out precisely who did it, but I know the players Reese65536, Sander Goth, and Crash all had roles in developing this route. And just so all is clear, this community has 2 players referred to as Crash. One of them I have been referring to as Crash41596, and then there's another player who is just labeled as Crash on speedrun.com, although he is also known as Crash6351. When I just say Crash, I am referring to the latter one, and that's the one I'm referring to here. Now, the last big thing we added was a skip in the final boss level. This is a short level you have to play before you can enter the final boss. The door to the boss is here at the top, but it's blocked by a barrier, so you have to get rid of the barrier before continuing. To open the barrier, you need to hit 3 buttons located in these 3 wings of the level. So the traditional route looks something like this. Start here, go to each wing one by one, hit the 3 buttons, and then proceed to the top to enter the final boss. The player Tie Game discovered you can get past the barrier without having to press all the buttons. He first found a clip through the roof here which allowed him to get behind the barrier, but this was so precise that it was not humanly viable and was therefore not really useful for runs. Later, in 2019, he would find a consistent way to get past it. This was done by getting Gex into a glitched state. In this level, Gex is wearing a space suit with these rocket boosters, which grant him the gliding ability. The player Cheeseburger, or then known as Bullskull 213, discovered that by taking damage once to get invisibility frames and then during the invisibility frame enter the damage source again while in the air would make Gex enter a glitched state where his gliding rocket boosters are still on even though he is on the ground. This state results in Gex gaining slightly more speed than when running normally. Later, it was then discovered that this glitched state can be achieved much more easily. The level also has a bunch of these purple climbable walls. Well, by gliding into these climbable walls and holding the gliding button as you land on the wall, the same speed glitch could be achieved. You then need to pause the game for some reason to fully activate the glitched state. Once in this glitched state with slightly more speed, it's possible to run into the barrier with a specific way and then slide so Gex slides through the barrier and gets to the other side. Now, this trick was developed on the PlayStation version of the game, but unfortunately for us, this setup did not work on the N64 version. Now, I remember I spent so many hours on this trick looking for a setup and ultimately managed to make one, although it is somewhat precise and can probably be improved upon. After getting the glitched state, if you run straight at this wall, Gex will at some point start running in place and the camera will start shaking. You can then stop running and go into first person view, find a very precise angle and then let go of the first person view and start running forward at the same time. If all of this was done right, Gex will run up onto the barrier and then you can just hold upright and jump once to clip through. So with this, we were able to go straight from the start of the level to the barrier, clip through, and skip all the buttons to open the barrier, saving around 1 minute of time. I should note here though that at this time the trick was a bit problematic, because sometimes when you tried to do the setup, there was a sort of invisible wall blocking Gex from getting onto the barrier. Or this might also have something to do with Gex's height off the ground, and that his height prevents him from running onto the ledge. So this trick would only work around 50% of the time. I would eventually find a solution for this, but more on that later in the video. Now, just before we move on, I want to mention one more major time save we didn't really go for, but is possible and is used in the PlayStation version. This is in the level Beanstalker. We only did one TV cancel like Sander had done, but it is possible to do a second one, so you collect all 3 remotes in one go through the level. The route then looks like this. You climb up the beanstalk and blow out the candles here as you go. You then get this checkpoint and jump down to collect the candle remote, but you can TV cancel to die as you collect it. You then respawn at the checkpoint, climb a bit up to get another checkpoint up here, destroy 3 houses as you go down again. The remote for destroying the houses then spawns over here. After destroying the 3rd house, you die by falling off the level and respawn back at this checkpoint again. You can then climb all the way to the top of the level where you collect the top remote. Now here you have to perform an incredibly precise TV cancel. Since the button is so far from the ledge, a small jump won't get you there. Instead, you have to get on top of the TV, run on top of the TV to get full speed, and then slide off the TV, then turn around in the air to slide in the opposite direction to land on the button. Since you are still sliding, you can then jump, and since you are preserving your speed, you can get a high jump off the button, and you can then glide towards the opening here. Now, for this TV cancel, you don't actually die like all the others, but instead, since you are so high up, you can just glide towards the last remote and land directly on the button. This is a pretty cool route, but that second TV cancel is incredibly precise, so it's a risky strat to go for. If you miss it, you have to do all the work for the last 2 remotes again and you lose a lot of time, and it might even crash the game as well, so you have to reset your run. Now, for that last TV cancel, it is also possible to slide onto the button and glide towards the edge and then use one spin attack to get off the edge, which might be easier on the N64 with the added jump height. But this also needs to be tested more. I was not able to find out precisely who discovered this route, but it's likely Thai Game had a part in it, as he shows it in one of his TV cancel videos. And I should also mention that Thai Game was the one who discovered the method to slide off the TV to perform the TV cancel. Now, as for our event, Archie won the event with a time of 49 minutes and 33 seconds, so congratulations to Archie for winning his first holiday special event. My PB to this day is a 53 minute and 10 seconds run. Now, you might think it's a bit strange that we did not manage to get any new world records with all of these minutes of time save we implemented into the run, but keep in mind that we only ran the game for a month, and a big part of that was learning the route, researching what was possible on N64, finding setups for these tricks on the N64, and timing and routing things. Because the PlayStation version is considerably different from the N64 version, so it was not like we could just copy the PlayStation run. A lot of these tricks we didn't even realize were possible until towards the end of the month. The movement in the game is also not easy to master and will generally take people longer than a month to really get the hang of. I also just think it's a testament to how good Sander Goth is at the game that even with all these time saves we didn't really get close to his record. I actually think we did a great job modernizing the speedrun and providing the leaderboards with runs that actually have videos for new people to learn the game and take it even further. Now, Archie is an incredibly skilled runner and he has expressed interest in claiming the world record, so I at least wouldn't be surprised if he claims the world record at some point in the near future. Okay, time to look at the juicy stuff. After Sander achieved the last world record we covered in 2014, the 45-minute run, something major was discovered which completely altered the speedrun. You see, when we, the Holiday Special group, voted on the game, we didn't vote on the any percent route, or in other words, the fastest route, but in fact the category we played was called No Wrong Warp. All the world records that we have covered so far were any percent world records, but just set before the wrong warp was discovered. Then, in late 2014, after the wrong warp was discovered and the categories had been split, Sander stopped playing the no wrong warp category and switched to the new any percent. So Sander's journey with the game is not quite finished. Let's rewind the clock back to 2014 and see how things unfolded. So, in 2014 there was a lot of discussion on the Speed Demos Archive forums on Gex. The first semblance of a wrong warp came from the player Crash41596. Now, calling TV cancels can be somewhat of a misnomer, since if you ever step on the ground after TV cancelling, the TV will trigger and you will be booted into the TV. So maybe it's more apt to call what we are about to talk about as a TV delay or even TV storage. Crash41596 discovered that by placing a rideable donkey next to a TV button, then jumping on the button, doing a spin attack to keep control of Gex, and then moving on to the donkey, the TV entering animation would be cancelled or delayed, as Gex was not standing on the ground. He then moved away from the TV's location to unload the TV, went back to the TV, and then triggered the TV animation. This made something strange happen, where the TV animation was played and Gex was sucked out of the level, so a loading screen came up, but the game displayed a loading screen for a completely different level of the game, although the loading screen just soft-locked in that state. So although this didn't really work, it showed potential, since it seemed like the game was trying to load in a completely different area. Well, using this, the player Apollo Legend would discover a way to skip into the final boss of the game early. Now, I originally didn't really know what this early version looked like, but luckily Thai Game sent me a video from Apollo Legend of the original version of the wrong warp, so let's take a look. This is the last area in the game where you enter the final boss level. The TV to enter the final boss is located here in this cave, and remember, you need 30 remotes to enter this TV. Up on this roof here close by is a different TV with one of the bonus levels. And lastly, over here is a spot where you can get a gliding upgrade. So what you can do is you can enter this area, go up here to get the gliding upgrade, glide over here to the bonus coin TV, and on that TV you perform a TV cancel or TV delay. Back in the day, these TV cancels were done by using frame-perfect spin attacks to get off the roof without triggering the entering animation. Nowadays, it's much easier to use the method where you just skid or slide onto the button and jump off before the slide ends. Well, by pressing the button and getting off the roof here, the TV has been delayed. You then glide down here and into this tunnel. Now again, the layout of this area is a bit different than what I'm showing. The cave with the final boss TV is actually located down here, and when you go through this tunnel, the game teleports you from one to the other. Now, Apollo found out that by gliding up against the wall here, the game would teleport Gex outside of the wall on the other side, so he would go out of bounds. He then fell down, and just like in mission control for the training remote, when he reached the bottom of the map, he was teleported to the top again. He then fell down one more time and landed in a precise spot in the final area, and as soon as he landed, the TV entering animation began. Now, the game determines what TV you are entering based on Gex's proximity to the TV. So, by going far enough away from the bonus coin TV and being closer to the final level TV, when you land on the ground, the entering animation begins, but it takes you into the final boss level instead of the bonus level, provided you didn't do anything wrong, because this skip is super finicky and has a strong tendency to crash the game. In fact, it took Apollo many tries with save states to even get this to work once. Now, based on this Speed Demo's archive thread, Sander then helped him iron out some of the problems to make things at least somewhat more consistent. What they figured out is that you didn't really need to go out of bounds and that you could just fly directly into the final area and land at a precise spot to get the wrong warp. Now, this all sounds pretty awesome, right? I mean, just go directly to the final boss in the game, right? But there's a catch. You see, to have access to the bonus level to start the TV delay, you need 31 bonus coins, and collecting bonus coins takes time. In fact, when this skip was first discovered, the runners thought it was useless because collecting 31 bonus coins would probably be slower than collecting 30 remotes. You see, to get bonus coins, you need to unlock levels, and to unlock levels, you need remotes. So you would need to collect both remotes and bonus coins, which seems kind of slow. But, well, after some testing, Apollo realized that this did in fact save time, and not just a bit of time, but a whopping 10 minutes by his estimation. Well, it was now time to see how low the run would go. Unfortunately, we don't have much info on the first runs performed with the wrong warp. As Apollo Legend was the first to discover the wrong warp and that it saved time, he was also the first to run it. So again, a lot of history is unfortunately lost here. All we know is that Apollo was the first to run the category, but we don't know how many records he set. The first world record with video evidence was performed on the 11th of December 2014 by Sander Goth. However, in the splits it's written that the world record is a 31:45. So, at least we know Apollo Legend got a 31:45 at some point. This run was most likely performed sometime in the latter half of 2014, so we'll just put it here on the progression chart. Now let's look at the first route Sander used in this first run with video evidence. He starts by collecting the first free remote and then goes into the first level, totally Scrooged, where he collected 2 remotes and 3 bonus coins. Then in Clueless in Seattle he collected 3 remotes and 3 bonus coins. At this point the spin attack method to pause the game and exit the level had not been discovered, so he booted to the start of the game. He then got the training area remote by going out of bounds, but collected 1 extra coin in the training area as well. He then entered Holy Moses, but didn't collect any remotes and just went briefly into the level to pick up 2 bonus coins. In War is Heck, he collected 3 remotes and 3 bonus coins. On the way to the Organ Trail, he collected 2 overworld bonus coins. In the Organ Trail, he collected 3 remotes and 3 bonus coins. Then on the way to Cut Cheese Island he picked up 1 more bonus coin, and then in Cut Cheese Island he collected 1 remote and 3 bonus coins. He then save warped to the start and picked up 4 bonus coins in the overworld and entered Ed to Gecko and collected 2 bonus coins but no remotes at all. He then save warped again to the start and collected 1 more overworld bonus coin before clipping through this wall to get into the final area in the game. In the final area he picked up 3 more overworld bonus coins and voila, he had 31 bonus coins, while having collected only 14 remotes, and entered only 7 out of the 11 levels in the game. Skipping the levels Beanstalker, When Sushi Goes Bad, My 3 Goons, and Super Zeros completely. And in 2 of these level entries he had only collected very quick bonus coins, making those trips very short. Well, with these 31 bonus coins he was able to wrong warp into the final level, albeit it took him 3 attempts to pull it off, and then he could finish the game, netting him a time of 30 minutes and 32 seconds on the 11th of December 2014. Through the next year or so, Sander would then continue doing runs every now and then, improving the world record. A few days after the previous record he got a 28:29, then in March 2015 he got a 27:57, then in August 2015 he got a 27:55, followed by a 27:12. In September he then got a 26:40, and the last world record before we would see our next major route change came on the 9th of January 2016, clocking in at 26 minutes and 20 seconds. These runs mostly used the same route and tricks, although he would add in a few new small strats here and there, mostly though he just kept getting better at the game. Well, it's the end of March 2016 and we are about to see the last major improvement to the route when the player Thai Game drops this video. Gex 3, collect infinite bonus coins and paw prints. Item duplication. Thai Game had found a way to duplicate bonus coins, which in case you don't remember is the main requirement to get the wrong warp. So how does it work? When you enter the hitbox of a bonus coin, Gex doesn't always collect the coin immediately, but instead he can stand half inside the bonus coin for a few frames before the coin is collected. Also, when the game finally realizes Gex is in the coin does this collecting animation where the coin swirls around Gex. Now, as soon as the animation starts, the game increases your bonus coin count by 1, but the game does not update whether the coin has been collected or not until at the end of the animation. So if you step up to the coin so you are in the hitbox and then press pause before the coin collecting animation starts, the coin will still be there as you are paused. You can then press exit level and the game will resume briefly while a transition wipe clears the screen, kind of Looney Tunes style. During this wipe, the coin will get collected and the coin count goes up by 1, but the transition ends before the coin collecting animation is finished, so you end the level before the level updates the coin as being collected. You can then repeat the process and enter the same level again to collect the same coin again. And you can repeat this process as many times as you like. This of course made the old route completely outdated and a new route was formed. Sander would get a 25:34 at some point with the dupe, but on the 3rd of March 2016 he got the first world record with video evidence, clocking in at 22 minutes and 14 seconds. So let's take a look at the route he used this time. Sander started by picking up the free remote at the start before heading into the first level, Totally Scrooged. In there he collected 2 remotes and 1 quick bonus coin. He then entered Clueless in Seattle to collect 2 more remotes. In Clueless in Seattle he also implemented a new skip. You're normally supposed to take this route through the level to reach the maze here and collect the remote in the middle of the maze here. Now, yet again, the layout I'm showing here is just how it feels to the player. The actual layout for the level looks more like this. So, the player Thai Game had discovered that you could go into one of the rooms here and clip out of bounds using this fireplace here. He then just dropped straight down onto the remote here in the maze, saving around 10 seconds. The route then looked like this, where you enter this room and go out of bounds to drop down directly onto the maze. He then exited the level and collected 2 overworld bonus coins, so at this point he was armed with 5 remotes and 3 bonus coins. And having 5 remotes would grant him access to the level Holy Moses, and that's where the real magic would take place. In Holy Moses there's a bonus coin very close to the start of the level, so it is the most optimal place to dupe the coins quickly. So he could just enter the level, go to the bonus coin, press pause, exit the level and re-enter the level right away to repeat the process. He would proceed to dupe the same coin 27 times. He then saved and loaded to get back to the start of the game, where he used the gliding power-up to get over the wall here and get into the final area of the game. There he collected 1 last bonus coin by using the spin attack to reach a bit past the bars here, skipping having to open the gate. He then had the 31 bonus coins he needed, so he did the wrong warp to reach the final boss and finished the game. So now you only needed to enter 3 levels, collect 5 remotes, and the 31 bonus coins were collected from only 5 bonus coin source locations. Pretty impressive stuff in my opinion. I want to mention here that the bonus coin duping is N64 exclusive, so from this point forward the any % runs for the N64 became considerably faster than the PlayStation version. And unless something major is discovered for the PlayStation, the N64 will remain the faster version. But okay, the next day after the previous record we would see this game's 3rd world record holder, following Apollo Legend and Sander Goth. Thai Game, the one who had discovered the coin dupes, claimed the world record with a time of 20 minutes and 17 seconds on the 4th of March, and in the description on speedrun.com he mentions also having gotten a 20-minute and 1 second run, although there is no video for this run. Then, that very same day, Sander reclaimed the world record with a time of 18 minutes and 43 seconds. Thai Game, however, was not quite done yet, and on the 9th of March he claimed the world record once again with a time of 16 minutes and 8 seconds. And this time his world record would get to stay for a while. But eventually, around 2 months later, on the 27th of May, Sander took the world record once more with a run clocking in at 15 minutes and 42 seconds. Now, Sander was going for a 14-minute run, and finally, exactly 2 months later, on the 27th of July 2016, he would achieve that with a time of 14 minutes and 51 seconds. In this run, he did implement the spin attack pause trick to avoid getting booted out of Clueless in Seattle, and 1 route change by collecting only 1 remote in Totally Scrooged instead of 2, and collecting the training remote by going out of bounds instead. But I just want to note that this is an incredibly strong run for the strats used, so GG Sander on this frankly epic run. Unfortunately, at this point, Gex 3 on the N64 went into hibernation, and the next time anyone would run Gex any % on the N64 would be more than 8 years later. When I started brainstorming how I wanted to do this YouTube video you are watching right now, I had only played the no wrong warp category, but knowing how interesting the any % category was, I realized I really wanted to cover that category as well. But I only want to cover games and categories I have already speedrun, so naturally I decided just to learn the any % route as well. In my runs, I implemented 3 noteworthy strats which had not been used in any world records before. First was the aforementioned barrier skip in the final level, saving close to a minute. And as a side note, remember how this trick used to only work some of the time? Well, during some testing I figured out a solution to that. It turns out that by climbing on a wall before entering the last level makes it work every time. Kind of strange that you have to do something before entering the loading zone, which then affects things that happen after the loading zone, but I'm guessing it has something to do with Gex's height coordinates when being loaded into the next area. So, simply by climbing on this wall here on the way to do the wrong warp, you make sure that the setup for the barrier skip always works. The second thing I implemented was a faster and more consistent way to perform the wrong warp. When Sander and Taikame had done the wrong warp, they had entered the final area and proceeded to enter the tunnel here, where the final level TV is located, before doing the wrong warp. The reason they did this is that when you go through this area for the first time, a cutscene is played, and since you have to fly through this tunnel during the wrong warp setup, this cutscene can really mess with the wrong warp and where you land. And although you can cancel the cutscene right away, playing the cutscene really seemed to make the wrong warp considerably more inconsistent, and often caused the game to crash. Well, I actually ended up spending multiple days researching the wrong warp setup to try to find a consistent method to do the wrong warp with the cutscene in the setup, so we could skip having to run all the way there, which takes around 20 seconds. I tried so much stuff and was on the verge of giving up, but ultimately found out some of what makes this trick work. Now, normally when doing this trick, you would get the gliding ability and fly from this roof to the next roof in the fastest line possible, a straight line. I, however, discovered that by taking this flight in an arc like this, swinging away from the buildings, the wrong warp would pretty much always work. Granted, you land on the right spot at the end of the trick. The reason I believe this works is because if we look at how the map is actually laid out, you can see the area with the TV taking you to the final boss is down here. And if we look at it from above, by flying in this arc, you fly towards that area. So I'm guessing that when you fly towards it and have the camera pointed towards it, you're actually loading it into memory, and having it loaded into the memory before pressing the bonus coin TV button seems to be a key factor in making the wrong warp consistent. This would also explain why the wrong warp was more consistent for Sander and Taikame after going into the room to load the cutscene. They hadn't known it, but they weren't just getting rid of the cutscene, they were also loading the last TV into memory, and that's why it was generally less likely to crash. Now, I don't really know if this is how it works exactly, but regardless, just by changing the flight from one roof to the next by taking a slightly wider route, the wrong warp becomes so much more consistent. I then found a pretty much 100% consistent method to perform the wrong warp itself with the cutscene, which had not really been done on the N64, and I just want to say that before all this I almost didn't want to run the game because the wrong warp was so inconsistent. But by finding these two things, the altered flight path and the setup, I think the speedrun is now much more approachable for new runners, which is always a plus. So with this, I had another 20 seconds of time save. The last thing I implemented was a consistent setup to do the so-called YOLO clip. Remember the clip which Apollo had found to get into the last area of the game, and how a later version had skipped clipping through by getting the gliding ability and jumping on top of this camera to then glide over the wall here. Well, the reason people opted to use the gliding ability to go over the wall was because clipping through the wall had always been incredibly inconsistent. Well, during my time playing through the game, I found a very consistent and quick setup to perform the clip through the wall, and by utilizing that twice in the run, both when getting out of bounds to get the training remote and when going into the last area, it saved around 20 to 25 seconds. So when we add all these new time saves together, we have around 1 minute and 40 seconds of time save compared to the old record. Although I did not go for the clip in Clueless in Seattle, so let's call that 90 seconds. Now, a testament to just how good Sander's last world record was is that despite having these 90 seconds of time save in a speedrun this short, I had a very hard time beating his run. But on the 1st of April 2025, I just barely managed to squeeze out a run with a time of 14 minutes and 46 seconds, a 5-second improvement to the world record. Now, after this record, I actually found one more time save, which I had for some reason missed during all of my research for the game. You see, I came across a video by Taikame showing an even faster way to beat the final boss of the game, saving around 15 seconds over the older method I described earlier in the video. In this faster version, Gex starts by shooting Res once across the platform, but before going across he eats a new fly to reset the projectile timer and picks up another fly which latches onto him. You can then jump across, and instead of shooting Res multiple times to move him backwards, you wait for just the right timing and then you can jump out of Res's radius and back into it. This ends the attack phase, so you can shoot him and hurt him. If you did all this fast enough, you can repeat the process and jump out of his radius as he starts his next cycle, and just barely shoot him one more time within the same projectile cycle. The timer then runs out, but Gex has another fly attached to him, so he can eat that fly to start the timer again, and then you can again repeat the same steps 2 more times within that timer to kill the boss. By doing the boss this way, you can avoid having to go back to the platform here to refill on ammo to shoot the boss, and instead kill him in one trip to the central platform. This strat is however pretty difficult to perform, but also very doable with some practice. With this new method to beat the boss, I really wanted to update the world record, not because I wanted to optimize the category, but more because I felt the world record should include all the main strats in the run for any future runners to see. So on the 6th of April 2025, I started streaming, not knowing that this day would mark a pretty significant day for the Gex 3 speedrunning community. During this stream, I managed to set 2 new world records. First a 14:17, and then a few attempts later a 14:06. I was pretty happy with this, but had lost some time in that last run, and I felt I should probably go for a sub 14-minute run before moving on. But that would have to wait for another day. However, after the stream I looked at the Gex speedrunning Discord and was shocked to see that Sander had posted his first Gex 3 PB to the Discord in 8 years, a 14:30, which at the time of posting Sander thought was a new world record. He, however, didn't know I was streaming, and he had set his 14:30 around 1 hour after I had set my 14:17. Still, this was very big news. Sander coming back to the category after an 8-year hiatus was very exciting, and I personally felt very hyped. Now that Sander was back, I knew I would inevitably lose my world record very soon. But I kinda felt great about it, because I knew I never had the ambition nor the talent to truly optimize this category. Sander, however, could. That isn't to say I don't feel proud of my accomplishments. Getting the world record for this game is one of my proudest achievements in my speedrunning career. It's truly something I never expected to do when I started running the game, and having been the person to find new setups, make things more consistent, and just generally elevate and modernize the speedrun is something I feel incredibly proud of. And that's besides just being the individual who forced Sander out of retirement. So I feel I have done my fair share when it comes to pushing this game. But now that Sander was back, it didn't take him long to reclaim his first place position. He allowed me to keep the world record for 10 more days until on the 16th of April he reclaimed the world record with a blistering 13:27. Absolutely shattering the 14-minute barrier, and of course he is not done yet. This 13:27 is the world record at the writing of this script, but Sander has mentioned that he wants to get a sub 13-minute run, which with all the new strats would probably be of similar quality to his old sub 15-minute run. I'm truly so happy that he came back, and I can't wait to see how low he takes the category now. Now, this is it for the world record progression, but if we really want to ramp things up, we can look at one more piece of media. A fairly recent segmented any percent run made by Sander, utilizing pretty much every viable time save in the most aggressive way possible. A segmented run is not performed in one sitting, but is instead performed in smaller segments, which are then put together with video editing to create a sort of hypothetical, perfect, humanly viable run. Sander released his segmented run on the 21st of August 2022, and it clocks in at an insane 11 minutes and 58 seconds. This segmented run is an absolute piece of art, and I will have the link for it in the description of this video. I highly recommend watching it at some point. It really shows just how much potential there is still to optimize this game further. So okay, we're not quite done yet. I still have one more last thing for us to look at. To truly finish this speedrunning journey of ours, I think we should look at the fastest tool-assisted speedrun, or TAS, for the game. Now, this TAS was made by Apollo Legend and utilizes a route that nobody has been able to replicate to this day, even using a TAS. So we don't really know how this even works or how Apollo Legend was able to make it work. But the TAS file is available and is confirmed to work when played on an unaltered ROM. Let's take a look at the route, and I promise we are almost done. This is the last route I'm gonna show you. Apollo's TAS starts the run by skipping all the levels in the game and heads directly into the final area with 0 remotes and 0 bonus coins. He then approaches this secret level TV, which, unlike the bonus coin levels, doesn't require any remotes or bonus coins to enter. He then spin attacks towards the button, so he TV cancels when he steps on it. And remember, at the end of each spin attack, you have 1 frame to start a new spin attack before the level entry animation starts. So Apollo proceeds to chain together 24 of these spin attacks to get close enough to the final level TV, so that when he stops spin attacking and the level entry animation starts, he gets sucked into the final level instead of the secret level, and greatness ensues. Apollo managed to enter the final level without a single remote or bonus coin. This task clocks in at an absolutely insane 2 minutes and 39 seconds. Now, the reason nobody has been able to replicate this trick is because no matter where players position Gex during the spin attacks, he always gets sucked into the secret level despite being closer to the final level TV. And even if we knew how to replicate this, chaining together more than 20 of these frame-perfect spin attacks is probably beyond human capability. But who knows, I might be dead wrong about that, and some kind of pause buffering setup might eventually make it consistent. But yeah, this is pretty much the final frontier of Gex 3 speedrunning. I find it kind of amazing just how much potential the glitches in this game provide for speedrunning, and with how little love the N64 version has received in the past few years, there is particularly much potential to take the N64 leaderboards considerably further than where they stand now. And yeah, that's the state of Gex 3 speedrunning today. I just want to mention that I did of course not cover every single little time save or skip in the game, and there are of course plenty of little skips or innovations that the community has worked on. There's also so much history to be found in the PlayStation version of the game, which has seen much more speedrunning activity throughout the years. The PlayStation version has some different level layouts, some unique glitches, and feels very different to the N64 version, so I just wanted to be very clear that this video I have presented does not represent the whole story of the Gex 3 speedrunning community. Well, what can I say? The script for this video was supposed to end after the previous part, but while making this video there have been some developments. I know I promised I wouldn't explain any more routes, but wouldn't you know it, we're not quite done yet. While researching for this video, I found an old Discord post from TyGame where he mentions an old video by Apollo, which TyGame had downloaded and kept on his hard drive. This piqued my interest, and I asked him if he had any more videos from Apollo, which might shed some light on the history of Gex 3. And on the 10th of May 2025, TyGame shared 7 old videos with me that Apollo had made. One of these was called Gex Res Early Tutorial Detailed. Well, in that video, Apollo describes his method for achieving the wrong warp. But more importantly, he also speculates a bit on whether the 0 bonus coin wrong warp might be possible or not, which he would later confirm was possible by making his previously mentioned TAS. Remember how the TAS has to string together 20 plus frame perfect spin attacks? Well, in this video, Apollo also says this.
If you could clip out of bounds somewhere around here, you would basically be able to destroy the whole route.
Now, why was this so powerful? Well, if we could initiate a TV cancel off this secret TV and then go out of bounds here, Gex can fall to the bottom of the map. But remember, just like in Apollo's original wrong warp method, when he reaches the bottom, he gets warped back to the top. So you can essentially take your time to maneuver Gex towards this final boss area and land there to trigger the wrong warp. Well, this was new to me. I had never even considered going out of bounds to do the wrong warp, so I decided to look into it. The same day the Thai game had sent me the videos, I booted up the emulator, and only after a few minutes of glitch hunting I found a spot to get out of bounds, where if you jump into this sign, sometimes Gex will clip through the wall. Okay, kind of promising I guess, but there were still a plethora of problems. After doing the TV cancel, you can chain together spin attacks with frame-perfect B presses, but you can't jump, since getting off the ground takes more than one frame, and if you try to jump, Gex will get sucked into the TV. So how would we get the height to reach the sign? Well, for that, the gliding ability would probably help. So I got the gliding ability, used the sliding technique to perform the TV cancel, and jumped off the button for a bit of height. But unfortunately, that was not high enough to reach the sign. Luckily, there are these tires here on the side, which will make Gex bounce, so I tried jumping off the TV towards the tires, did spin attacks when landing on the tires to avoid getting sucked into the TV, and then flew towards the sign. But yet again, I still needed just a tiny bit of height. Well, to get that height, I found out that instead of bouncing off the tire and going directly to the sign, you could instead land on top of the TV here with one buffered spin attack, and then add one frame-perfect spin attack, so you could get further on the TV. You could then glide off the TV, and then you would have enough height to reach the sign. Unfortunately, I was not able to clip through the sign when gliding, and all hope seemed lost, until luckily I just happened to fly towards the wall right as the timer for the gliding ability was running out. When the timer runs out, the game does a transition animation to change Gex's costume back to his original one, and it turns out that if you're in the right spot, behind the side of the sign, right as the transition takes place, you can clip through the wall and get out of bounds. Later on, Sander would then find out that with the lag and added jump height when playing on console, landing on top of the TV was in fact not needed at all, and you could just jump off the tire and glide towards the sign to get the clip, which made the trick considerably easier, since then we didn't really need any frame-perfect inputs. Now, this was extremely exciting. Although super difficult, this method was definitely human viable. Instead of having to string together 20 plus frame-perfect inputs, this method just needed a few very manageable movement inputs and some precise timing to reach the sign at the exact time the timer runs out. We knew this trick was too precise to be 100% consistent and be something you could get every time, but we also knew that this was something you should be able to get every now and then with practice. But we were also just halfway there. We still needed to find out how to do the wrong warp itself without crashing the game or getting sucked into the wrong TV. Like I mentioned before in my video, Apollo's task had never been replicated because no one knew how it worked. Normally, when you activated the secret TV and approached the final boss TV, the game would still always suck you into the secret TV, making it so the wrong warp didn't work, or the game would just crash. Now, with save states, I did manage to get the wrong warp a few times by landing in some random spots, but it was incredibly inconsistent, maybe working once every 50 times I tried landing. Those odds, coupled with the difficult trick to get out of bounds to have a shot at the wrong warp, did not bode well. However, the next day, the 11th of May, after banging my head against this trick for some hours, I found a somewhat consistent method to do it. Once you're out of bounds, if you follow a specific star here in the background and use Gex's tail as a metronome, you can travel somewhat consistently to this spot on the map. Then, if you aim at the right location and press forward at the right time when falling past the area, Gex will hit a wall, which sort of guides him to a spot where the wrong warp will often work. I believe this works either because touching the wall loads the final level TV in properly, or since the wall slows you down a bit, it gives the game a bit more time to load the TV in properly. Either way, we now had a method to perform the wrong warp at least somewhat consistently. Now, just to recap, let's go through this whole trick one more time. You get the gliding ability and wait for the right time to start. You then start by sliding onto the secret TV button and jump off it to do the TV cancel and store the TV. You then glide towards this tire, press B before landing so Gex is spin attacking when he lands to avoid triggering the TV. Do the same thing for this next tire. You then bounce and start flying at the peak of your height. You then glide towards this sign, and if you did everything previously with the right timing, you can then clip through the wall during the transition right as the gliding ability timer ends. You then mash C down to get the camera through the wall, find the right star to aim towards, fly for 10 tail wags towards the star, wait for the level to loop around, find the second star to aim towards, press forward at the right time, and hopefully land in the right spot to be able to trigger the final boss TV and achieve the wrong warp. This route or trick might just be one of the more intricate skips I have ever come across in my speedrunning career. There are so many parts to this and all of them have to go just right for the end result to work out. But it's also kind of beautiful and miraculous that this even works out at all. But okay, getting all of this is pretty difficult. But with all of this figured out, it became inevitable that someone would eventually pull it off, so both me and Sander started lapping out the details of the setups and throwing attempts at the new route. Now, Sander, having the true mentality of an elite speedrunner, just kind of YOLO'd the wrong warp in a super fast way. So this meant that when he would get the wrong warp, he would most likely achieve an incredibly fast run. I, however, went with a much safer and consistent way to do the wrong warp, so although slower than Sander, I had better odds at actually finishing runs. My goal was just to get in a world record or two before Sander would optimize the time. Well, the plan worked for me because on the 13th of May 2025, I achieved the first 0 remote and 0 bonus coin Gex 3 speedrun, clocking in at 7 minutes and 39 seconds. Now, in this run, I was so incredibly nervous after getting the wrong warp that I completely botched the final fight, so there was still a lot of room for improvement. Sander then finished his first run the next day on the 14th, and he unfortunately suffered a similarly bad endgame as me and got a 7 minutes and 30 seconds run. The next day after that, I got a run clocking in at 6 minutes and 3 seconds on the 15th of May. Then the next day after that, Sander managed to finish another run, and this time the whole run went fairly well, and his run clocked in at 4 minutes and 37 seconds, knocking out 2-minute barriers, and this is the world record at the making of this video. This run still has some mistakes, so the run can definitely go lower, especially if we make the wrong warp a bit more consistent. To get a rough idea for how inconsistent this whole run is, we can look at my stats. I have done around 100 attempts with the current setup. Out of these, I have managed to clip through the wall to get out of bounds 10 times, and out of those 10 times, I have gotten the wrong warp 2 times. So that's around 2% of runs that I can actually finish. Now, with practice, I'm sure you can get more consistent with the clips and the wrong warp. So maybe a good runner could get a clip every 5 runs and a wrong warp every 2 or 3 times, bumping the percentage up to around, let's say, 8 to 12% runs finished. I am of course just speculating here, but I feel this category is destined to be a grindy one where you will always have to do a lot of attempts to even finish a run. But that tends to be the case for shorter categories like these. I should also mention that Sander recently discovered that you can in fact clip through the wall to get out of bounds while gliding without the timer running out. This seems like it's incredibly precise, so we don't know if this is a viable option to replace the method where the timer runs out, but it is something that we should definitely look into. And I'm sure if more people ran the game, we could find lots of small optimizations, both for more speed, but also for more consistency. As for how low this run could go, Sanders' run is good, but not perfect, and still has a few places where you can save a few seconds here and there. So the run can definitely go maybe 20 seconds lower or so. As for a sub 4 minute run, I think it's possible, but it would probably require a new setup for the wrong warp, where we don't fall in the out of bounds section for as long. This category is still just so new that we don't really know the limits yet, so we will just have to see how it develops. Okay, so how does Gex hold up as a speed game? Let's start with the movement, and it's kind of janky to be honest. Having only 8 directions available while using a joystick feels kind of rigid, making for some pretty awkward movement. But I guess a positive to that is that you can also just use the D-pad to run the game, which is something I actually did at first. The jumping system is also kind of janky since you need to gain speed for high jumps, so sometimes you will think you have enough speed but you don't and end up with a small jump, which is kind of annoying. At first when I played the game I didn't realize you could buffer the bounce jumps and I was always trying to jump as I landed on the ground. This resulted in endless frustration because Gex only sometimes jumped and sometimes didn't. But once I figured out how the actual jumping system works, it became pretty fun and intriguing. Overall, I think the movement is pretty clunky, but also offers some unique challenges after getting used to it. Moving from point A to B as fast as possible can be fairly difficult because of the long jumps and their trajectory, which you cannot change after you start the jump. I'd say overall I like the movement in the game, but getting used to it may take some time and I can see why some people would not like to play this game at all because of the movement. Now, regarding the no wrong warp category, I think what really makes this speedrun for me is all the tricks. Almost all the levels have a plethora of speedrunning tricks which are super fun to perform. Some minor ones that save a handful of seconds, and others that completely make or break the run, where if you have a decent PB, you essentially have to reset if you fail them. Chaining together different remotes through TV cancelling is also very satisfying. As for the old any %, or the route where we collected 31 bonus coins, which I ran more recently and is more fresh in my memory, it should be a pretty bad speedrun. It's a short category with a lot of pretty hard tricks, and around 1/3 of the run is spent coin duping, doing the same thing 27 times in a row. By all accounts, this should make the run repetitive and boring, but for some reason I kind of liked it, to be honest. The tricks, although intense, are very fun to perform, and the coin duping actually has nuance to it. You have to keep your focus during the dupes, with both counting and performing the dupes, where you might have to make minor adjustments to any dupe depending on Gex's location. On paper, this sounds like a pretty horrible speedrun, but for some reason I found myself really enjoying it. I guess the nature of speedrunning preferences is that they can be pretty contradictory. In my last video I talked about Spider-Man and how it had a very intricate and unique movement system, which should make for a great speed game, but I didn't really enjoy it very much. Then we have Gex, which I feel should make for a pretty bad speed game with its clunky movement and repetitive nature, but I find myself really enjoying it. I almost find some beauty or fulfillment in that contradictory nature. I find there is something inherently satisfying about just liking something and not having to justify it to anyone. Basically, I personally have found a lot of fulfillment with Gex 3 Deep Cover Gecko, and I think I'll just leave it at that. Now, again, this is where this part of the script ended, but since the new any % route has completely changed, I should probably talk a bit about that as well. I don't think there's very much to say. It's a short category, so inevitably it's going to get a bit grindy. You will have to reset a lot of runs and do the same thing over and over again, but well, that's just speedrunning short categories in general. This being a category where you are always trying to do a wrong warp and it only works once every few hours of playing, it's kind of interesting how your nerves and heart rate will spike every time you actually get the wrong warp to work. So you will probably always have to do the final boss under a lot of pressure. If that sort of thing entices you, I would recommend trying out this speedrun. Although I'm not much of a speedrun grinder, I did find myself enjoying running this category as well. Maybe it was just the thrill of a new route, but for my parts at least, I did enjoy it. And yeah, that's about it for this game. I want to thank Sandergoth, Tygame, Andy Panther, Reese65536, and Crass41596 for their help with research and trick explanations. Also, thanks to Archie and Bluescreen18 for running the game with me, and lastly but not least, thank you so much, dear viewer, for watching, and especially to those of you who regularly watch my channel, your support and kind words in the comments are always very appreciated. The next video will be about the next game we ran in the holiday special event, the Reinhardt category for the game Castlevania Legacy of Darkness.